this dream, I ride 190 horses at once.
Well, hello there, humans, hoonigans, and earthlings. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and whomever you're lucky enough to be doing it with, I hope you're having a good week. Craig Lieberman back at you. Today we're going to talk about the Maxima, so let's jump right in. I've been getting a lot of requests to talk about this car, so I thought we should probably dig into the specs and tell the story of the car. The car started its life as a bone stock 1999 Maxima SE. It had the base motor making 190 horsepower. Originally sold by Nissan under the premises of being a four-door sports car, the car was kind of sporty and practical at the same time, so it was a good choice for a lot of families and people stepping up from smaller cars. I bought this car as a daily driver because at the time I was running the Naira series and had to commute from South Orange County, California to Beverly Hills every day. That drive is about 59 miles each way, and as anybody knows who's ever been to California, the traffic can be somewhat of a fucking nightmare. I chose a Maxima because at the time my girlfriend had a 1996 Maxima that served us pretty well, and I thought it would make a good commuter car. She wouldn't let me take her car, so I had to go buy one for myself. Since my commute was 120 miles a day, I opted for an automatic transmission. At the time, I already had my Supra, which, as you probably know, was still yellow. After several months of commuting, the front end had picked up a fair amount of rock chips, and rather than repaint just the whole front end, I decided to paint the entire car, and I chose Viper Blue, a color I borrowed from the 1996 Dodge Viper GTS. Since I was going to paint it, I decided to add a Stillen front lip, their side skirts, and some rear trim pieces, and had the louvered hood vents fabricated. At the same time, the seats were sent to Stitchcraft for blue suede inserts. I also got my hands on some Bomex side mirrors and some blue carbon fiber bits for the interior. Once the car came back from the paint shop, I took it straight to my stereo shop, and they worked day and night to install a wild sound system and 3 LCD screens. They also installed JBL W12 GTI woofers and other bits, including amplifiers. Of course, any modified car needs wheels, so I opted for TSW 19-inch trophy wheels with the intent of finding different wheels later on, but I thought the rounded look of the wheels kind of matched the exterior of the car. In total, the car was modified over the course of about 8 weeks to do everything. Fast forward a few months. Universal had already rented my Supra, but we were still looking for cars for use by other characters in the movie. One day, while doing a camera test for the Fast and the Furious, I brought my Maxima up to Eddie Paul's warehouse. At the time, we were still actively casting cars for certain roles, and if you watch my earlier video on how we did the casting, you'll remember that I had a couple of cars in mind for Vince's role. Ultimately, Universal's choice to rent this car for Vince came down to sheer convenience. By this time, we had done at least a half a dozen car casting calls, and Universal had still not found the perfect car that they liked for Vince. Renting my Maxima was simply convenient. Once Stillen got wind of this arrangement, they offered up their supercharger kit, a set of AP Stillen racing brakes, and every suspension part in their catalog. This car, of course, was most remembered for 2 key scenes. The first one is outside Toretto's Market. The scene, of course, is memorable for a few reasons, not the least of which was I'm talking about the car. Jesse and Vince start talking about fuel maps, which would lead audiences to believe that the Maxima was running a standalone ECU, and of course that was not the case. In fact, back in 2000, not many tuner cars were running standalone fuel management systems at all. Supercharger kits like the Vortex Stillen kit were good for about 6 psi. Any more boost than that would be a problem given the car's stock fuel system and high static compression ratio. Companies like Stillen used an FMU, or fuel management unit, which boosts fuel pressure based on boost pressure from the turbocharger or supercharger, whatever you're running. It was kind of a band-aid back then, but it worked fine for most street applications. In fact, my V8 347-inch Vortex supercharged Mustang also used a fuel management unit. The car made about 260 horsepower on Stillen's dyno at 6 psi. That supercharger was capable of running about 8 psi safely with perhaps an intercooler, a bigger fuel system, and a different pulley. Was it fast? Well, it depends on your definition of fast. When your other car is a 600 horsepower Supra, no, this car was not fast. To a lot of people, 260 horsepower in a front-wheel drive car is plenty fast enough, and it was certainly fast enough for its next scene, the burnout sequence.
Vince, get over here, give us a hand.
Looks like you got all the help you need, brother.
To do the burnout, it was a matter of greasing up the front tires, putting the car in reverse, standing on the gas, then shifting into drive while still standing on the gas. And if you know anything about automatic transmissions, this is called a neutral drop, and it tends to do damage to the transmission. But if you listen closely, you can hear the car auto upshift to second gear as the car gets traction. Then it auto downshifts to low 1 or first once the car bogs on the launch. Despite this abuse, the car was fine. Other than the rear quarter panel damage from the Brian and Vince's fight scene, the car was actually in pretty good shape when I got it back. I kept the car for another year or so while it served as a press car for Infiniti, JBL, and Stillen. The car was also featured at the Hollywood premiere of the first movie, but by then, a lot of things had changed on the car. Before long, I remembered why I hated front-wheel drive cars, and I bought myself an E46 M3. The M3, of course, also got modified too, and ultimately became the Uber M3, which you probably read about in old forums and so forth. That car is still around and now in South Carolina. Around late 2003, I sold the Maxima to a guy by the name of John Teisling, and he eventually sold it again. It wound up in a car museum in Branson, Missouri, and was recently sold yet again, this time to someone else on the East Coast. It's mostly the same as when I had it, of course, but someone completely changed the trunk stereo system, but I imagine the new owner won't be restoring that back to my specs. And I wouldn't either because it was never featured in the movie. Ultimately, it was a good daily driver, it was convenient for use in the picture, and it was memorable in its role in Fast and Furious. Were there better cars? Absolutely. It was a fun car while I had it. Vince enjoyed driving it. He autographed the dash. Got to see it again at the premiere. But I was happy to hear that so many people are still excited about this car, and so I wanted to bring in the specs. That's it for this week, everybody. Thanks for watching. Please make sure to subscribe.